We're looking at a household in deep, deep distress in ancient Israel, right around 850 BCE. A woman is facing a brutally grim financial reality. She's about to lose her two sons to debt slavery. She has absolutely nothing left to sell. Her entire estate, just an empty house and one single small jar of oil. But that is the baseline for what happens next, which turns out to be one of the cleanest, most fascinating case studies in liquidity creation we have from the ancient world.
So, to really understand the severity here, you have to understand the legal framework of the time. Her husband left behind some serious unpaid debt, and back then, unpaid debt didn't just ding your credit score. Creditors could physically collect by seizing the debtor's children as indentured servants. She has no income stream, no inventory, no land to liquidate. On paper, she is completely insolvent. She's facing massive, looming liabilities with zero visible assets to cover them.
Now, you might already know this as the widow's oil miracle, a traditional story about faith. But for this explainer, we're putting a hard boundary right there. We are looking clinically at the financial mechanics underneath it all. We want to know how an illiquid, basically worthless asset gets systematically converted into exactly enough liquid capital to clear a specific debt. No more, no less. Section 1. The insolvent household and the core asset.
The widow takes her distress to an advisor figure, and he makes this absolutely crucial intervention. He points out she doesn't actually have nothing. She has one sole asset, that small jar of oil. But here's the catch. Right now, it's entirely illiquid. It's non-productive, it's sitting idle, and it's mathematically worthless against the massive scale of her liabilities. You obviously can't hand a creditor one small jar of oil to offset the lifetime labor of two humans.
So the advisor doesn't just hand her cash. Instead, he gives her a highly specific, actionable financial plan. Step 1, go to every single neighbor and borrow every empty container they own. Step 2, maximize that capacity. Don't just ask for a few, ask for literally as many as you can physically carry. And step 3, only then do you convert the asset.
This brilliantly illustrates the underlying mechanic of this whole strategy. She could easily ask, well, what good are empty jars? But the advisor's logic is flawless here. The value of the outcome depends entirely on how many she brings back. The absolute requirement is to maximize container capacity before initiating any kind of asset conversion. She literally has to build the infrastructure to hold the capital before that capital is even generated.
Section 2. Executing the conversion. Moving from theory to action.
The widow follows his instructions to the letter. She takes that original, illiquid asset and pours it into the first borrowed container. And here is the mechanic at play. The borrowed jar fills to the absolute brim, but the original source doesn't run dry. That's 1 unit of capacity fully maximized.
Then she moves right to the next jar, and the next. The momentum really starts building here. Neighbors hand over empty pots, jars, whatever containers they have, and every single one of them comes back full.
The execution here is fast, it's relentless, and it's completely scalable. Jar after jar after jar. Her sons are rapidly stacking the full ones aside and swapping the empties in. The volume of liquid capital scales at this incredible speed, matched exactly to the physical capacity they just pulled from the community. It's a high-speed liquidation process operating at absolute maximum efficiency.
And then a hard stop. She reaches for another jar, and there isn't one. 0 empty jars remaining. The exact moment that last borrowed jar is full, the oil instantly stops flowing. Not a second before, not a second after.
Let's clinically analyze this mechanism because it's vital to understand. This was a liquidity event, but it had a hard ceiling. And that ceiling wasn't set by the underlying asset itself. The oil had no defined limit in the account, so to speak. The limit was set entirely by her preparation, her jar supply. She successfully converted a non-productive asset into liquid capital, but the output was capped strictly by how much she was prepared to receive.
Section 3. Clearing liabilities. The payoff phase.
Okay, so the liquid capital has been created. Now it has to be deployed. She takes the full jars, goes to the market, and sells them. That illiquid asset is now pure cash. The proceeds easily cover the entire debt scroll. It gets marked paid and handed right back to her, with enough liquid capital left over to fund her household's ongoing living expenses.
The contrast on her balance sheet is stark. Consider her situation just 1 hour ago. She was functionally insolvent, holding one illiquid jar, facing the literal loss of her children. And now, 0 debt liabilities, holding liquid cash, and her family is totally intact. And this wasn't achieved by new money magically appearing out of thin air.
It was achieved through the mechanical conversion of an underused asset at scale.
Section 4. Modern financial parallels.
Now, this ancient case study perfectly mirrors mechanics used by financial institutions today. Converting illiquid oil to cash through borrowed capacity, that's the exact core logic behind asset-based lending, home equity lines of credit, or even the rapid liquidation of unused inventory. You identify an underutilized asset and you build a structured vehicle to borrow against it to clear your immediate liabilities.
It really highlights a profound economic reality. The fundamental value existed the whole time. The widow wasn't broke, she was just incredibly illiquid. The challenge wasn't a lack of value at all. It was purely an issue of liquidity and format. The wealth was trapped in a form that just couldn't be handed to a creditor to pay a bill.
Which leads us with the absolute core takeaway for the modern analyst. The real skill in this scenario wasn't producing the resource. The real skill, the true mechanism of wealth preservation here, was building enough structural capacity in advance to capture the conversion. At the end of the day, you cannot convert more than you are prepared to hold.
Which forces a pretty tough question about your own balance sheet. What illiquid assets are you sitting on right now? And more importantly, have you built the capacity to actually capture their value? And that wraps up our explainer on the Widow's Liquidity event. Ancient text, modern economics. Join us in the next explainer, where we're going to break down the mechanics of a tax collector who doubled his wealth through a system of legalized overcharging and exactly how that still shapes taxation today.